Hello, my name is Janice B. Gordon, and this is Scale Your Sales Podcast. Welcome to Scale Your Sales Podcast, listed number 9 of 43 best podcasts for every sales professional. I am Janice B. Gordon, the customer growth expert, recommended by LinkedIn Sales as one of 15 innovating influencers to follow. In today's episode of Scale Your Sales podcast, my guest talks about being the only one in the room. Having spent 20 years in the healthcare sales, selling equipment and devices, she was often the only one in the room. But what was interesting, she said that this empowered her even more to do better, to work harder, to prove herself. Whereas actually, she works with men and women, but women often find themselves in the sales environment being the only one, and that can be crushing to them. So she understands and really helps them through that. Being in the industry for such a long period of time, there have been so many changes. So we talked about um, moving the needle and guiding them through the buyer's journey. And what that takes, it takes curiosity. It's a word that we talked about quite a lot. Why curiosity is so important for sales leaders today, but also for salespeople when they're talking to customers. So you're going to love this conversation. My next guest has over 20 years of experience in the healthcare industry. She brings a unique blend of expertise, energy, and practicality to her clients. She unlocks the grip our mindset, beliefs, and behaviors can have on us, separating what serves us or sabotages us, starting with our self awareness. Replacing these patterns with purposeful value, confidence, and action producing tangible results. Welcome to Scale Your Sales podcast, Karen Kelly.
Thank you so much, Janice. I'm delighted to be here.
Well, I'm delighted to have you. Both of us are women sales experts, and it's so good to be part of a community that women in sales that are really kind of empowering other women in sales. So it's fantastic to have you on the podcast, Karen.
Thank you. And it is great to be part of such an important and timeless community.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Now, I'm really keen to find out about. We know that sales is a male dominated industry, and I would particularly say that's in healthcare as well. So, tell me about your kind of 20 years of working in that industry in sales healthcare.
Yeah. So thank you for that. And it is a male dominated industry. And I would say it's shifting a little bit in that industry. But I got into medical device sales and software sales in 2000. And, you know, a lot of people, when I share my story about being the only woman in the room and being the first to do many things, and they said, wasn't that hard? But I didn't know any different. It was all I had. So there was no contrast. And it's only now in retrospect that I'm, this much older as a mother. I'm like, well, yeah, that that wasn't right. And that didn't feel right. But in the time, it was just you were surrounded by men. It was just that era of that dark navy suit, and you kind of looked like this sea of Navy SEALs, and you conformed. So while I wasn't, and it wasn't by pressure, nobody was making me do this. It was just you're a product of your environment. And so I remember just being very, dominant male energy. I probably would have had that anyway. So I'm one of four girls, and we were just very always competing against each other. But I feel like I blended in. But now, after 20 years of kind of going through, in I find that I'm the voice for other women who struggled, because I don't feel like I struggled. I feel it was more of and not equal playing field, but that further motivated me. And it's a lot of people say, did you find your voice? I'm like, my voice was loud. I never lost my voice. That situation did to me what might not have done to others, but it motivated me. And where people say, well, did they hear you? And I was very intentional, knowing that I was the only woman, knowing that I wasn't following what they were talking about with hockey or whatever. I just said, when I make my point, it's going to be clear, because I have to make a name for myself. I have to take a stance, knowing that I'm kind of the underdog. So I used it to my advantage. But a lot of women don't do that now. And so what kind of me is, it really is in the sales team, it's incumbent upon the sales leader to recognize that there's perhaps one or two people that are dominating the conversation, and other people have a lot of valuable suggestions, insights to share. And if you don't hold space for them and invite them to do that initially, they might stay in their, in their shell. And so I think it's just such a missed opportunity. So for me, I use it to my advantage. I had a great career. But I remember thinking at one point it'd be nice to move into leadership. And I just looked around and there was nobody like me. And I just thought I was a mentor to many, but I had nobody, like, who's going to help me climb the ranks? And there was nobody that looked like me, and there was never change going to happen. And I remember I was actually on the board of a women's networking group, and I brought it to the table and said, what are your thoughts on this? Can we bring someone in like this for International Women's Day? And they just looked at me as if I had horns. And I just knew at that point, like, that was a pivotal point. I can remember now where I was sitting and what the room looked like. And I felt the air suck out of it, in that there's no alignment here. Like, you don't share my passion and my emotion here to drive inclusivity and to make our voices heard. And I just knew at that point, this isn't going to be forever. And so there's little things like that. But to answer your question, I use advantage, and now I coach others to really do that, to get that strong sense of belief and know that we bring an innate, unique skill set, and we outperform. The stats don't lie. Women outperform men, and it's not against us. We need to have an inclusive, diverse team, and so I think leaders can look at that and just look at, when you have everyone that looks and sounds like you and the same, like, you're not gonna promote curiosity and creativity and offer different perspectives. So it's in their best interest to bring in more women and really help them thrive and ultimately help the company thrive.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting you got to that point when you thought, nothing's really going to change. I've got horns here, and I think, I think many women, you, myself, have been in a situation where we're the only, and it's I think it's important to recognise that you're going to just do yourself some damage if you are going to have to keep pushing against the status quo, in that nothing is going to change here. And I think the beauty is, and especially post pandemic, is that you're able now to move, and not necessarily physically because so much is online, but move into environments where you're not tolerated, but you're appreciated for your diversity, for your unique difference and everything. So I think it's also having the confidence to know when you need to cut your losses and go.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not a failure on you, it's a failure on the organization.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that organization 5 years down the line will realize that they've kind of missed many opportunities and they're struggling, because I think that the buyers and customers, that environment has moved on, and they're, having the sales teams that are full of men that go into the boardroom, then that's not cutting it anymore. It's got to look and feel different. So I think, we have more options available to us, but you've also, the first thing is recognizing when you need to cut your losses and go and get out of there before you start damaging yourself and your confidence, trying to, make a change in an organization that's never going to change. I don't know what your thoughts are.
I think that's sales, right? I think at some point, when you've done your due diligence, you've done everything you can do, you have to be able to walk away. And a lot of people wouldn't do that. And whether it's being the only woman in the room, even hearing people, this toxic culture, and everyone's talking bad and threatening to leave, and, and then 5 years later, they're all still there. And so there comes, and I would say that's a celebrate. I wouldn't look at it here. I would say celebrate yourself. You bet on yourself, because at some point you realize this isn't a good fit for me. And the longer you stay in there, the harder it's going to be to leave. So yeah, you got to bet on yourself because they're not going to change. And the same as your customers, not everyone is for us. And I think the harder you try to squeeze this, round peg in a square hole, it's just it's eroding the profession of sales. But part of salespeople, maybe that's why I've been in sales so long, is that I can recognize like when there's an alignment and when there's not. And I just have this abundant mindset that I'm not going to push. Like there's so many other people that would welcome and value what I have to bring, that I'm thank you for your time and I'm moving on.
Yeah, yeah. And it's moving on from the company, it's moving on from the deal. It's, and that's about your own self-belief and confidence and understanding what you have, you're enough, I
Yeah.
think. Yeah,
And
yeah.
and for me, I feel like that's where women can continue to work. Because for me in sales, I mean, we both can teach any tactic and approach, and but it's bigger than that. Like it comes to the belief, the self-worth. Do we have imposter syndrome? Are we attaching our net worth to our self-worth? And if you struggle here, everything downstream is going to be impacted. So if we don't have that belief, that's what we're projecting. We're saying that, I don't believe myself. I have imposter syndrome, so therefore I'm inviting you to share that same belief. So it all starts up here.
I agree with that. I think it's really interesting that, like all of society is telling women that they have a particular role and don't go out of your box. And they have that from very young, whether it's, teachers. I remember a teacher telling me I'm not intelligent enough, to go on and do things really because I was a black person, or, and I
Hmm.
meet many women that are told these things growing up through the school or the parents or whatever it may be. When we're looking at advertising as well, the way that men are portrayed compared to women and all of this, in the music industry, all of this, we're completely bombarded with that. So it's not just the sales industry. And then
Hmm.
all of a sudden we're expected, or we want women to switch and compete with men. But actually, we're a different DNA.
Hmm.
So actually, rather than us there was something that someone said on LinkedIn about women need to back themselves. And I messaged saying, well, women are backers, but actually the industry needs to look at what they're doing and how they're doing it and not expect women to be men. They're not.
Yeah.
Are we less confident, or do we just portray our confidence in a different way?
Hmm.
Are we expected to portray it in the way that a man would, or is it really on the industry, on leadership, on organization to understand that there is a diversity out there and there isn't one way that shows up as confidence?
Yeah. I think it's the lens in which you're perceiving that, right? And if the lens is through a white male, yeah, our confidence might be different. It's not that we have it, as you said, it might be portrayed differently. And I think that's a very valid point, because people are looking for that look alike, feel alike, and it's like we're different. And I think people need to just be open to that. And I think that's where good leadership comes from, even allowing someone to bring a different idea, a different way of thinking other than themselves. And when you can foster that, that's what I coach my team is like, when you can get your prospect to stop and go, oh, I've never thought about it that way. That's a great, like, that's a win, because
Yeah,
everyone's the same. Like when you can just invite that. But again, if you're thinking about a sales team, that's leadership. We have to invite that, embrace that diversity, that difference of thought, that curiosity. And a lot of it might not look like, the way in which I display my confidence might be different. It's not this real bravado, but and there's quiet confidence. There's people that are just, they go up there and they're a really great storyteller. They can still provide some inflection, some pausing, but they're not that typical bang your chest kind of ring the gong. And it's like, for me, I find when you look at someone who's doing the latter and they're really bravado, that's insecurity. Like you're masking that. When someone owns it and they go up there and they can truly be themselves, they can share their story, they can be vulnerable. Like that's confident for me.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I would completely agree with that. So, I think that it's important for women in sales to really understand there's a diversity that is acceptable. And if it's not acceptable in the organization you're going in, if there's only one way, which shows up as often white male, then it may not be the organization. I think you're absolutely right. It's the leadership that needs to understand that they need to make it accessible, a diversity of behaviors, and not judge it only one way. That's really, really interesting that you use the word curiosity. Tell me more about that.
In terms of what? In terms of
Well, you said that it's really important for leaders to be open
oh,
to the kind of culture of curiosity, as you know.
I just think, yeah, like think outside the boxes, like the traditional four walls, the way in which we've always done things. Be curious, be open to hearing how others, but that others are doing it. But that takes vulnerability, right? Because a lot of time leaders are up there, and the perception is, I have all the answers, I have it all figured out. And it's like when you can pause for a moment and be like, I don't. I actually am curious to hear what you have to say. How would you tackle this approach? And I feel that a lot of people think that's weakness because they're expected to there. And I'm like, oh my God, I would follow that person all day long because I'm like, even in the pandemic, people are like, oh, we're going to do this. And we've done this before. And I'm like, nobody's done this before. So if you're not telling the truth there, what else are you not being upfront about? So I just think lean into that curiosity and just say, I wonder where this could take us. And I'm willing to travel down that path with you. And so that invites the individual to be curious, but it also empowers the other person to share their thoughts. That next time, you're going to get that team empowerment, that team collaboration, because they want to be part. Think about what you're trying to achieve is change management. And if you can get that buy-in by disarming and leading with transparency, oh my God, why wouldn't you? So it all starts with just being curious. And even I would say, curious to yourself, like, why am I not inviting this? I'm a big proponent of doing inner work and just saying, like, where's this reservations, hesitation coming from? Because there's something that's in you that's blocking it. And I would say, pull that apart and understand, like, why do I have to be in control? And probably something back years ago, back to what you said, a teacher might have told them something, they might have got cut from a sports team or something happened, but there's a reluctance there to lean into their curiosity. And I would say, I don't understand why.
Yeah, yeah, love that, love that. So, tell me more about the other person's perspective. You say that, this is really important when working with sales organizations and helping them to be buyer and customer centric, something that I really advocate. And I know that you talk a lot, as I do, about the other person's perspective.
Well, I think when you deal with this is in any situation. A lot of times, as salespeople, we prepare and we say, okay, this is our discount, range. This is our key selling messages. And when you look at what the customers are looking for these days, last report Gartner suggested was it's experience. They want it. They're craving an experience, and they're prioritizing it more than price or product. And so when you can really consider the other person's perspective, so whoever's on the other side of your camera, whether it's, your sales leader and your team, whether it's myself and a prospect, and just take 3 to 5 minutes to get inside their brain and really be empathetic to their role and understand, like, what 3 to 5 questions will they have coming onto this call? What do they know about me and my organization? What do they maybe hope we don't talk about? And a lot of it might be assumptions, but it gives you a starting point. A lot of it might be on their persona. Okay, these folks are HR. They're really going to be, understanding the morale, the culture versus someone else. And what this allows you to do is when you can get on the call and you're asking questions and you're tailoring your message around them because you've taken that time just to be very intentional, all of a sudden they disarm because it's a pattern interrupt. Most salespeople start with their logo and they're throwing all their products and specs and best in class and end to end, and you're just like, ugh. And so this is different, and it's a feeling. And they say, wow, you made me think again. That curiosity is like you were curious enough to get inside of my brain, try to understand what I go through, what motivates, challenges me. And by doing that and adopting things through their lens, you're asking questions that they haven't even thought about themselves. And they're thinking, oh my God, Are you literally inside my brain? And you've tapped into their brain. And it's not this big an hour exercise. It literally is 3 to 5 minutes. Think about when they get into work. What are things that motivates them? How are they going to be putting out fires? And then again, what do they want on this call? And so many times I do that, and you can just see their shoulders come down and the body language change, and they're open because I've taken the time to really consider things through their lens. And when salespeople are saying, "Oh, we do this," you just have to ask yourself, "Okay, impact to them? We haven't considered their role. Does this make more work for them? What's the impact to their team? Is there actually a benefit for them? Do they see, is it perceived value, or is it just all value on your side?" And so I think it just allows them to feel heard. You're holding space for them, and you're truly making them the center of the call. And there's so many people on their websites that were buyer centric and all this terminology, and they get on the call and they don't even ask a question about the buyer. And so it's like, are you really buyer centric? So do the work, 3 to 5 minutes, and really truly understand what the other person's perspective is before you get on the call. Makes a huge difference.
I think it's really interesting because I speak to salespeople that they would say, "I am very biased. I'm all about the customer." But
Yeah.
then when you're absolutely right, when you go into the question, it's all about them. They're kind of guiding them down a path that they want the customer to go on. So if you get someone in front of you that really just hasn't flipped that script, that is really struggling, they think they're saying it from the buyer and the customer's perspective. They think they're getting in the head of the customer and seeing it from their world. But in the way that they're used to asking the questions, it's still all about them.
Mm-hmm.
How do you help them to really flip that script?
Yeah, that's a great question because I think even when I coach people and they'll say, "What's your greatest strength?" and they'll say, "I'm my self-awareness." Usually that's enough. Those people that say it's the greatest, usually it's the reverse. So I think it's the same here, is that when people say I'm customer centric or I'm buyer centric, you know, the intention might be there, as you said, like they think they're doing it all. And a great way is play the game tape doesn't lie. Like, are you recording it? Can you play it back and watch yourself? And even play it back with the volume down and watch your body language. But more importantly, look at the your buyer, look at your audience, look at the spoken, but more importantly, the unspoken. And do you see them close off? Do you see them lean back? Do you see one word answers? And you can see what happens is, and even when you ask a question and they've answered it, and you share that same experience. So if I was saying, "Hey, Janice," or you said, "Karen, I'm going to Spain this week and I'm so excited," and I'll jump in, "Oh my God, I went to Spain. I love it. Have you gone to Barcelona?" And but on their scorecard, they've checked the box rapport, but I hijacked the rapport. So it's like you have to really get intentional. And I think you need some form of scorecard, some form of measurement, because again, we have the intention, but are we fully aware? And in the moment, and it's a work in progress. The first time you do it, it's going to be amazing. But I think you should start looking at what are things I can do to really ensure that I am holding space for them. I am giving the floor. When I ask a question, can I put myself on mute so that I don't speak over them? And I was on a coaching call the other day, and I actually had to tell the person, because I started jotting down how many times he overspoke me, and it was to the point where I felt, now I got to speak really fast and get it across because I know what's coming. And at 5, I stopped. I was like, you have to be mindful of that, and I understand where it's coming from. You're not a bad person. You're passionate and you want to share. But then when I said, "Well, where were we?" And that's exactly what happened. Like you gave me the opportunity. And I said, when your prospect's trying to share something and you cut them off, oh my gosh, like you just turn that tap of gravy off. You want that nugget. And so a part of it's awareness, part of it's a scorecard, and just maybe pick one or two things that you can really implement that allows you to really look at, how do you know you're doing it both positively and negatively? So if you start seeing people shut off, if you see a face like mine that was getting a bit perturbed when they kept on cutting me off, that's an indicator. So be intentional. And when it's others focused, again, like don't, like when you show up, you can even turn your self view off, make it about them, and really
Yeah.
be mindful with question. You've asked them something. They might need a few extra seconds to think about it, but don't fill the space. Things like
Mm.
that actually will help you be buyer centric versus reverting back, trying it, and then jumping back to the typical salesperson.
I'm smiling because I remember when I was coaching somebody, and I actually, and this was even online, and I no, the one that I did was we had to look into each other's eyes and not, that is often really difficult for people to hold a gaze,
Uh-huh.
and look into somebody's eyes and not say anything and not move and just be comfortable with that. Or, not say anything at all and just be comfortable with pausing.
Mm.
And that's often really hard for humans to do for some reason. They always want to jump in and fill the space. So when you kind of pull them back from that and just get comfortable with space,
Mm-hmm.
I often find that's quite a good exercise to do. You might be giggling to each other, smiling, whatever, but actually there's none of that. It's just holding the gaze and
Mm-hmm.
being comfortable with holding this, or holding the space and being comfortable, and see how long you can say nothing and just look into someone's eyes.
It's
It's
a
so
great,
simple, but
but it's a great activity, and I do something similar because if we're asking someone to do it in the moment, they have to be able to do it in practice,
yeah,
right? And I think it's very important to do that. And one thing I'll say is, if you try it once and you see what you yield as a result of pausing, that's all you need is once. You're like, I got all that from zipping up. I can do this, and
yeah,
that was me. I didn't always hold space. I didn't cut people off, but I wanted to share my message. And I remember the first time I just let them speak, and then they added, and I was like, "Oh, this is a new one. They're adding, they're feeling it." And I just thought, I will never again. I'll be the one that's almost awkward silence. You've got to the 7-second mark, and I'm like, "Do you anything else you want to share?" Oh, and by the way, and then the suitcase opens, and you're like, "Okay, here we go."
yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Love that, love that. Okay, so um, if you're on a desert island, what would be the one thing you took with you, Karen?
Well, first of all, I would actually love to be on a desert island right now in February in Canada. I would probably take nothing and just be grateful to be on a desert island away from my family for a little bit of a break. You know what? I would take no technology. I would take no technology. I feel like they were just too teched out. I would probably take a notepad and a pen. And the reason is, I think because we're so teched out, we don't really tap into all the abundance, all the thoughts, all the stories, all the insecurities, everything we have in our heads. And if we could just get it on paper and read it. And sometimes, I've been journaling for years, and sometimes I'll just flip back and I'll read a page and I'm like, oh, wow. It's like you're getting to know that person again. And there's so many layers to us. And there's so many other things we're holding back that sometimes I think I've got nothing to write. And I write things. I'm like, I didn't even know what that word, who wrote that word? It's like I'm being channeled, but I just would bring a pen and paper and really get my thoughts out, really explore my creativity. Again, I'm all about curiosity, like what's in there? Like if I bring this, what's going to come out? And with being surrounded with all these women sales experts and they're all authors, maybe a book would come out. Who knows?
That would be awesome, awesome. I'm
Yeah.
sending you on that desert island. Pen and paper, I can do that. Not a problem. It's yours. It's yours.
Okay. Done. Done. I'll hold you to that.
Karen, how can listeners get hold of you?
They can visit my website, k2perform.com, and they can get me on LinkedIn, Karen Kelly. Be happy to chat and answer any questions and help you out if I can.
All right, brilliant, lovely. Thank you so much for sharing your insights and knowledge on Scale Your Sales podcast.
Thank you, Janice.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Scale Your Sales podcast. If you like this discussion, feel free to listen to other episodes or watch the captioned show on YouTube and subscribe to future episodes. I would really appreciate it if you would leave a positive review on iTunes. Thank you.